Before you dive into this gripping tale of betrayal and triumph, hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. Your engagement fuels our passion for storytelling. The unveiling. The sterile silence of the hospital room was pierced only by the soft cries of little Leo resting against Eleanor Hayes' chest, as if he were the only solid thing in a world that felt like it was fracturing. His tiny fists clenched and unclenched with the innocence of one just arrived, oblivious to the storm brewing within these white walls, heavy with the scent of antiseptic. Eleanor, 32, her eyes swollen from exhaustion and cheeks flushed from labor, felt the sharp tug of her C-section stitches with every slight movement. But none of it mattered as she held her son. For 9 months, she had pictured this moment. William walking in with flowers, kissing her forehead, whispering how proud he was, how they had created something beautiful together. But when the door swung open, there were no flowers. William Hayes appeared in the doorway, impeccably dressed in a dark gray suit, the same one he wore to seal major deals for his London real estate firm. His perfectly slicked back hair contrasted sharply with the tense expression on his face. In his hands, he carried no gifts, no celebratory balloons. He held a manila envelope. "How are you feeling?" he asked, but his voice was hollow, a mere formality to be dispensed with before he got to the true purpose of his visit. "Tired, but happy," Eleanor replied, adjusting the blue blanket wrapped around Leo. "Isn't he beautiful? He has your eyes, William. Look closely." But William didn't approach. He remained by the window, gazing out at the dreary February London cityscape. His fingers drummed restlessly on the envelope he held, and Eleanor noticed he avoided looking directly at her. "We need to talk," he finally said, and those 4 words dropped into the silent room like stones into a still pond. Eleanor felt something clench in her stomach, a pain far sharper than any she'd experienced during labor. Leo stirred restlessly in her arms, as if sensing the tension that began to fill the air. "Now?" she whispered. "I just gave birth, William. Can't it wait?" He turned then, and for the first time since he entered, he met her eyes. But it wasn't the gaze of a man in love, looking at the mother of his child. It was the cold, calculating stare of someone about to close an unpleasant but necessary deal. "I don't want to lie to you, or to our son," he said, each word rehearsed, delivered as if practiced in front of a mirror. "I've fallen in love with another woman." The world stopped. Leo ceased moving. The hospital sounds faded. Even the air seemed to thicken around Eleanor, as if someone had pressed the pause button on her life. "What did you say?" she managed to articulate, her voice barely a thread. William placed the envelope on the bedside table next to the untouched water jug. "Her name is Victoria. She's moving into our house next week." Eleanor instinctively clutched Leo tighter to her chest, as if she needed to shield him from the venomous words filling the room. The baby began to cry, a sharp wail that seemed to protest the cruelty of the moment. You're joking," she murmured. But she knew he wasn't. She recognized that expression on William's face. It was the same one he wore when he'd made an irrevocable business decision. "The papers are in the envelope. My lawyer will contact you next week to sort out custody and maintenance details." Tears began to stream down Eleanor's cheeks, mixing with the cold sweat that had broken out on her forehead. Her lips trembled as she tried to find words, but none seemed adequate for the magnitude of what was happening. "How could you do this to me now?" she managed to ask. William headed towards the door, but paused before leaving. For an instant, something akin to regret flickered across his face. "It's better this way, Eleanor. Clean and honest." And then he was gone. Eleanor was left alone with Leo, who continued to cry as if he understood his world had shattered before he even knew it. She rocked him gently, whispering words of comfort she also spoke to herself, as her eyes fixed on the manila envelope, waiting on the table like a death sentence. Outside, The rain began to beat against the hospital window, and Eleanor knew nothing would ever be the same. If you were Eleanor, what would be your first move? How do you think she should react to such a cruel betrayal? Share your thoughts in the comments below. A new chapter. The untouched divorce papers lay on the hospital table when the night nurse entered for her rounds. Eleanor hadn't slept a wink. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw William's impassive face, uttering those words that had shattered her world in seconds. "How are you feeling, Mrs. Hayes?" asked the nurse, a kind older woman with a perfect bun. "Fine," Eleanor lied, adjusting the blanket around Leo, who slept peacefully, oblivious to his mother's emotional turmoil. The nurse checked her vital signs and frowned at her elevated blood pressure. "Have you been anxious? Your body needs rest to recover from the C-section." Eleanor nodded silently. How could she explain that her husband had just destroyed their family when her son was barely 18 hours old? "Will your husband be back tonight?" the nurse continued, making notes on the chart. "It's important that you have support during these first few days." The question felt like a slap. Eleanor felt tears threaten again, but held them back, biting her lower lip until she tasted the metallic tang of blood. "No, I don't think he's coming." The nurse looked at her with compassion, as if she had seen that expression too many times on other new mothers. "Well, men sometimes get scared with responsibility. Give him time, dear. Everything will work out." After the woman left, Eleanor finally took the manila envelope with trembling hands. Her fingers fumbled with the clasp as Leo stirred slightly in the transparent plastic bassinet beside her bed. The documents were cold and technical, filled with legal terms that converted 9 years of marriage into numbers and clauses. But it was one specific line that hit her like a hammer. The petitioner requests joint custody of the minor child and states that marital assets will be divided equally. William had planned all this while she carried their son for 9 months, while she suffered morning sickness, while her feet swelled, while she couldn't sleep because Leo kicked her ribs at night. He had been falling in love with another woman and calculating how to get rid of his wife as cleanly as possible. Her mobile phone vibrated on the table. It was a message from her sister Sophie, from Liverpool. "How's my nephew? Is William excited? Send photos." Eleanor stared at the screen for long minutes, unsure how to respond. How could she tell her family that her marriage had ended before Leo's first day of life? How could she explain that the man she had entrusted her future to had discarded her as if she were a business contract that no longer suited him? She typed and deleted several messages before deciding it wasn't the time. She turned off the phone. For the next few hours, Eleanor fed Leo, changed him, soothed him when he cried. But she did everything as if she were watching another person from outside her own body. Her movements were mechanical, automatic, while her mind slowly processed the magnitude of her new reality. At dawn, when the first rays of sun filtered through the hospital window, she made a decision. She called Sophie. "Eleanor, how are you, sis? Is the baby born yet?" "Sophie." Her voice broke before she could continue. "What's wrong? Is everything all right? Is the baby okay?" "Leo's perfect, but William's gone." The silence on the other end of the line lasted an eternity. "Gone? What do you mean, gone? Has he fallen for someone else?" "He asked me for a divorce yesterday in the hospital. He said she's moving into our house." Sophie let out a string of curses that would have made a sailor blush. "That son of a... in the hospital? After childbirth?" "He already had the papers ready, Sophie. Everything was planned." "Listen to me, Eleanor Hayes. You're getting out of there, and you're coming home. Right now, Mom and I are coming to pick you up." "I can't. The doctors said that..." "The doctors can go to hell. My sister is not going to stay alone in a hospital after what that bastard did to her." For the first time since William had left the room, Eleanor felt something akin to relief. Sophie had always been the stronger of the two, the one who fought for what she believed was right. "Are you sure? Am I sure? Eleanor, That man just made the biggest mistake of his miserable life, and when I'm done with him, he's going to regret being born." After hanging up, Eleanor looked at Leo, who watched her with those dark eyes so similar to William's. But instead of pain, for the first time, she felt something else. A tiny but firm spark of something that very much resembled determination. "Don't worry, my love," she whispered to the baby. "Your mom's going to be all right. And so will you." Outside, London awoke to the sound of morning traffic. But inside that hospital room, something had changed. Eleanor was no longer just the abandoned woman crying in silence. She was a mother, and mothers fight. Do you think Eleanor's anger will lead her down a path of self-destruction or empowerment? What would you advise her to do next? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to hit that like button if you're engrossed in this story. And make sure to subscribe to our channel for more real-life dramas and inspiring tales. The encounter, the drive from London to Liverpool, felt like an exile. Eleanor rode in the back seat of Sophie's car, holding Leo close, watching the skyscrapers recede and the familiar terraced houses and blooming parks of Merseyside draw closer. Every mile left behind was a step further from the life she'd built with William, but also a step closer to home. Sophie drove in silence, casting worried glances in the rearview mirror every few minutes. Their mother, Brenda, had insisted on coming along, muttering prayers and curses under her breath the entire journey. "That man has no soul," she'd say for the 10th time. "Abandoning a woman who just gave birth. What kind of beast does that?" "Mom, please," Eleanor whispered. "Leo can hear you," Brenda retorted, turning in the front seat, her eyes burning with indignation. "He needs to know real men don't abandon their families." When they arrived at the family home in the heart of Liverpool's Georgian Quarter, Eleanor felt a crack in her resolve. The small 2-story house, with its traditional brickwork and garden bursting with geraniums, represented everything she'd left behind when she married William. The simplicity, the warmth, the unconditional love. Sophie had prepared Eleanor's old room with a borrowed crib and filled the wardrobe with baby clothes she'd bought that morning. "It's not much," she said, blushing slightly, "but Leo will need his own things." Eleanor hugged her younger sister, feeling for the first time in days that she wasn't completely alone in the world. For the first week, she lived in a bubble. She'd get up every 3 hours to feed Leo, sleep when he slept, and spend the rest of her time sitting on the small back balcony, watching her mother water the plants, whispering advice to the flowers as if they were confidants. "Plants, like women, need time to bloom after a storm," Brenda had told her one afternoon, without looking directly at her. But on Wednesday of the second week, the bubble burst. The mobile phone she'd kept off vibrated insistently on the bedside table. It was an unknown number from London. "Mrs. Hayes, this is James Miller, Mr. William Hayes's lawyer." The voice was professional, cold, efficient. Exactly the kind of person William would hire to do his dirty work. "What do you want?" Eleanor asked, feeling every muscle in her body tense. "My client wishes to establish a visitation schedule for his son. We also need you to sign some documents related to the sale of the marital home." "Sale? The Chelsea house will be put on the market next week. The proceeds will be divided, as stipulated in the prenuptial agreement." Eleanor felt the world tilt again. The house where she had dreamed of raising Leo, where she had painted the baby's room a soft yellow because she wanted it to be a surprise, where she had planted the small lemon tree in the garden, thinking her son would play under its shade someday. "I didn't sign any prenuptial agreement," she managed to say. "According to our records, you did, in 2018, before the wedding. If you need to review a copy." "That's a lie." "Mrs. Hayes, I suggest you hire your own lawyer. My client is being more than generous with the divorce terms, considering the circumstances." "What circumstances?" "Well, your history of emotional instability could complicate the issue of custody." Eleanor hung up the phone with trembling hands. Emotional instability? How dared William paint that narrative when he was the one who had destroyed their marriage? Sophie, who had overheard part of the conversation from the doorway, entered the room with a determined expression. "What did that son of a bitch say? He says I signed a prenuptial agreement, that they're selling the house, that I have emotional problems. That's a lie, and you know it, but what if it's not, Sophie? What if he has fake documents? What if he takes Leo from me?" Sophie sat on the bed and took her sister's hands in hers. "Eleanor, look at me. That man has been manipulating you for years. He convinced you to quit your job at the magazine. He isolated you from your friends. He made you believe you were fragile and dependent. But you're not alone anymore. I don't have money for a lawyer. I don't have a job. I have nothing. You have your family. And you have something William never had: integrity." That night, as Leo slept in the crib beside her bed, Eleanor couldn't sleep. The lawyer's words echoed in her head like a constant threat. William had not only abandoned her, now he wanted to erase any trace of her existence in his life. But as she watched her son's peaceful face, under the dim light of the night lamp, something hardened inside her chest. A cold, calculated determination she didn't know she possessed. William believed he knew her. He believed she was the same submissive woman he had molded during years of marriage. But he was wrong. The woman who had given birth to Leo no longer existed. In her place, someone completely new had been born. What would be your immediate reaction if you were Eleanor after seeing Victoria? How far do you think Eleanor should go for justice? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more thrilling stories. Your comments motivate us to keep creating. The Unlikely Ally. The first encounter with Victoria Thorne happened by chance, but it etched itself into Eleanor's memory as if it had been orchestrated by fate. Eleanor had taken Leo for his first pediatric checkup at a private clinic in Liverpool. Sophie had insisted on accompanying her, worried about her sister's emotional state, which seemed more fragile with each passing day. They had just left the consultation with good news. Leo was healthy and growing perfectly. "See, he's a strong boy, just like his mum," Sophie had said as they walked through the clinic's elegant marble lobby. That's when Eleanor saw her. Victoria Thorne was sitting in the waiting area, casually flipping through a fashion magazine with studied movements, as if she knew someone was watching her. She wore a fitted white dress that highlighted her perfect figure, heels that probably cost more than the family's monthly rent, and blonde hair falling in perfect waves over her shoulders. But it wasn't her appearance that made Eleanor stop dead. It was the ease with which she smiled into her phone, the lightness of her laughter, the way she touched her hair as if the world were her personal stage. "It's her," Eleanor whispered, her mouth suddenly dry. "Who?" Sophie followed her gaze and frowned. "That over-processed Barbie?" Victoria was talking on the phone in a sing-song voice, loud enough for others in the lobby to hear. "My love, I'm done with the aesthetic consultation. Yes, the doctor says the rejuvenation treatment is perfect. No, don't worry. I'll be home before you get back from work." Home. Our home, Eleanor thought, a pang of pain in her stomach. Can you imagine? At 35, I already need Botox. But hey, you have to stay young for your husband, right? Victoria continued, laughing as if it were the funniest thing in the world. Sophie squeezed Eleanor's arm. "Let's go." But Eleanor didn't move. She was fascinated by this woman's nonchalance, by the way she talked about staying young for her husband, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. As if she didn't know that this husband had a 3-week-old son he'd just abandoned. Victoria hung up the phone and walked to the reception desk, swaying her hips with a confidence that Eleanor found obscene. "Excuse me, could I change my next appointment? My partner and I are going for a romantic weekend to the Lake District and..." The world stopped for Eleanor. The Lake District. The place where she and William had spent their honeymoon 6 years ago. The place where he had promised her they would build a beautiful family. Where they had joked about the names they would give their future children. Of course, Ms. Thorne. Is next Tuesday suitable? Perfect. You're a darling. Victoria turned to leave, and for a second, their eyes met. Eleanor expected to see something in those green eyes. Guilt. Shame. At least an acknowledgement that she was destroying a family. But all she saw was indifference. Victoria looked at her as she would any stranger in a public place, with no real interest, and continued walking towards the exit. But just before reaching the door, Victoria paused. She turned slightly, as if she had remembered something, and looked back at Eleanor with Leo in her arms. A small, cruel smile played on her perfectly made-up lips. She knew exactly who Eleanor was. "Come on," Sophie murmured, tugging her sister's arm. "Let's go right now." In the car on the way home, Eleanor didn't say a word. Sophie drove nervously, casting worried glances towards the back seat where her sister held Leo with an expression she didn't know how to interpret. "Eleanor, say something, you're scaring me." "She's very beautiful," Eleanor finally said, her voice strangely calm. "Sorry, Victoria. She's very beautiful, and young, and carefree." "Eleanor, you know what the worst part is, Sophie. She's not ashamed, not even a little bit. She talks about her husband as if I never existed, as if Leo never existed." Sophie pulled the car over to the side of the road and turned to face her sister. "That woman is a shameless conniver who got involved in a marriage, but you don't have to stoop to her level." Eleanor caressed Leo's cheek, who slept peacefully, oblivious to his mother's torment. "Do you know what she told me with that smile, Sophie? Without words, but she told me clearly. I won. Your husband chose me. Your life is now mine." That's not true, is it? She's living in my house, sleeping in my bed, using my washing machine, eating at my table. She's going to the Lake District, to the same hotel where William and I spent our honeymoon. In what part of that hasn't she won? Sophie didn't know what to say because, deep down, she knew her sister was right. That night, Eleanor stayed up very late, researching online. She looked for Victoria's social media profiles and found exactly what she expected. A woman obsessed with her image, with hundreds of photos posing in mirrors, motivational phrases about following your dreams and true love. In one of her most recent posts, she had written, "Life is too short to settle for less than you deserve. If something is meant for you, it will come, no matter how many doors you have to go through." The comments were full of hearts and congratulations from friends who encouraged her for her courage and new happiness. Eleanor closed her laptop with a cold smile. Victoria Thorne thought she had won. She believed William was a prize she had conquered with her beauty and youth, but she had no idea who she was messing with. What do you think of William's lawyer's tactics? Have you ever faced manipulation like this? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more thrilling stories. Your comments motivate us to keep creating. The grand plan, the call from Olivia Brown, came on a Thursday morning as Eleanor was nursing Leo on the small back balcony of the family home. Her photographer friend had that enthusiastic voice she always used when she had an idea she considered brilliant. "Eleanor, darling, I know you're going through a tough time, but I have a proposal that might help you." "Olivia, I'm not really in the mood for—" "Hear me out. I'm working on a photo project about real motherhood, not those perfect magazine shots, but true motherhood, raw, beautiful. Mothers who are struggling, who are finding their strength, and I thought of you." Eleanor shifted Leo, feeling the familiar twinge of her C-section stitches that hadn't fully healed. "I don't feel particularly strong right now." "But you are. I've known you since university, Eleanor. I remember the girl who wrote articles that made everyone cry in the student magazine, the one who defended classmates when professors humiliated them. That strength is still there. That girl doesn't exist anymore. Lies. That girl just became a mother under the most horrific circumstances possible and is still moving forward. That's not weakness, it's heroism. Eleanor remained silent, watching Leo cling to her index finger with his tiny fists, as if trying to hold on to life itself. It would just be for you, Olivia continued. Intimate, powerful photos, a gift of self-discovery. Nothing published without your permission. Just you, Leo, and the camera. I don't feel beautiful, Olivia. Eleanor, beauty has nothing to do with makeup or pretty dresses. It has to do with truth. And your truth right now is that of a woman who has been betrayed, but is still fighting for her son. That is the most beautiful thing there is. That afternoon, Sophie looked after Leo while Eleanor took her first truly mindful shower in days. She looked at herself in the bathroom mirror of her childhood home, seeing the deep, dark circles, the dull hair, the body that still bore the marks of pregnancy and childbirth. But for the first time in weeks, she didn't turn away in disgust. Olivia arrived at 5 in the afternoon with her portable equipment and that warm smile that had charmed half the university campus. She was a petite woman with curly hair and lively eyes, who had turned her passion for capturing genuine moments into a successful career. "How do you feel?" she asked as she set up the lights in Eleanor's room. "Nervous, vulnerable. Perfect. That's exactly what I need." The first few photos were timid, almost painful. Eleanor held Leo awkwardly, conscious of every imperfection of her body, every line of fatigue on her face. But gradually, as Olivia spoke in a soft voice and Leo settled in her arms, something shifted. "Now tell me how you feel when you look at him," Olivia prompted, camera ready, but not yet snapping. Eleanor looked down at Leo, who watched her with eyes too serious for a month-old baby. "I feel like he's the only pure thing left in my life. Everything else is broken, contaminated, fake. But he's real. He's truly mine." The camera's flash captured that exact moment. "And what else? I feel like I have to be strong for him. Not for me, because I don't matter anymore. For him, so that when he grows up and asks about his father, I can tell him his mother never gave up." Click. "Do you regret anything?" Eleanor thought of William, of Victoria, of all the years she had invested in a marriage that turned out to be a lie. "I regret being so naive, for believing that love was enough, for not seeing the signs." "What signs?" "The way William made me feel small. How he convinced me to quit my job because a wife should take care of the home. How he pushed me away from my friends because they were a bad influence. How he made me believe that without him, I was nothing." Tears began to stream down her cheeks, but this time she didn't wipe them away. She let them fall freely as she hugged Leo to her chest. "But I was wrong," she continued, her voice firmer. "I am something without him. I am this child's mother, and that is more important than being any man's wife." Click. Olivia continued photographing for almost 2 hours, capturing moments of vulnerability, strength, and connection between mother and child. Eleanor forgot about the camera, forgot about her insecurities, forgot about everything except that new feeling of reconnecting with herself. "Done," Olivia finally said, lowering the camera. "That was incredible, Eleanor. Can I see some?" Olivia showed her some photos on the camera screen. Eleanor gasped. The woman in the photographs was not the one she had seen in the mirror that morning. She was someone stronger, more dignified, more beautiful in her honest vulnerability. "That's you," Olivia said. "That's the real you." That night, after Olivia left, Eleanor stayed up looking at the photos her friend had emailed her. In one of them, she was in profile holding Leo, with the Liverpool sunlight filtering through the window, illuminating her face as she looked at her son with an expression of fierce, protective love. She was beautiful, but not in Victoria's artificial, studied way, but in an authentic, powerful, real way. For the first time since William had abandoned her, Eleanor smiled. And as she smiled, an idea began to form in her mind. An idea that had been quietly growing since she saw Victoria at the clinic, since she read her narcissistic social media posts, since she realized William had chosen the superficial over the real. An idea that could change everything. What do you think Eleanor's big idea is? How do you feel about her transformation so far? Comment below and share your predictions. The grand plan. The opportunity arrived disguised as a wrong number. Eleanor was feeding Leo in the kitchen of the family home when her phone vibrated with an unknown number from London. Normally, she didn't answer strange calls, but something prompted her to respond. "Mrs. Hayes, this is Charlotte Reed from Lux Interiors." Eleanor felt her pulse quicken. This woman thought she was talking to Victoria. "Excuse me, I think you have the wrong number. Is this not the number for the lady who lives in Chelsea? The house on Albert Bridge Road?" Albert Bridge Road. Her old address, her house. "No, I'm not her," Eleanor replied. But her mind was already racing. "Oh, how silly of me. Her husband gave me 2 numbers, and I must have mixed them up. Well, if by any chance you know her, tell her we'll be there tomorrow at 3 to finalize the details for the master bedroom and to bring the fabric samples she chose." After hanging up, Eleanor remained still for several minutes, holding Leo while she processed what she had just heard. William was renovating the house. Her house. The place where she had dreamed of raising her son, where she had planted the small lemon tree, thinking of a future that never came to be. He was erasing any trace that she had ever lived there. That afternoon, when Sophie returned from work, she found Eleanor sitting in front of the laptop, with an expression she hadn't seen in weeks, pure determination. "What are you doing?" "Researching," Eleanor replied, without looking up from the screen. Did you know Victoria publishes her entire life on Instagram? Her routines, her favorite places, even practically when she goes to the bathroom? Sophie walked closer and saw the open screens. Victoria's Instagram profile, Lux Interiors website, several tabs open with renovation companies in London. "Eleanor, I don't like this at all." "Look at this," Eleanor continued, pointing to a recent post by Victoria. "Last single weekend, before my love and I have our perfect honeymoon in the Lake District. Can't wait to relax in our paradise." Posted 3 days ago. And they're leaving this Friday. They'll be back Sunday night. That gives me 3 days. 3 days for what? Eleanor closed the laptop and looked at her sister with a serenity that was more frightening than any shout. "To remind them who I am." Sophie sat in the chair opposite her. "Explain yourself. And don't lie to me." Eleanor took a deep breath, and for the first time in weeks, spoke with the clear, determined voice Sophie remembered from their childhood. "William thinks he knows me. He thinks I'm the submissive woman he molded for years. Victoria thinks she's won something valuable. Both of them think they can erase me from history as if I never existed." "Eleanor, they're renovating the house, Sophie. They're painting over Leo's memories. They're turning his room into, I don't know, probably a walk-in closet for her." Tears threatened to fall, but Eleanor held them back. "They're going on their honeymoon to the Lake District, to the same hotel where William took me when we got married. He's going to whisper the same sweet words he whispered to me. He's going to promise her the same perfect future he promised me. And when they come back, they expect to find their little love nest completely renovated." "And what do you plan to do?" Eleanor smiled for the first time in days, but it wasn't a sweet smile. "I'm going to give them the welcome they deserve." That night, after Sophie went to sleep, Eleanor made 3 phone calls. The first was to Charlotte Reed, the decorator. "Hello, I'm the lady who lives on Albert Bridge Road. I think my husband gave you my old number by mistake." "Yes, exactly. Look, I've been thinking. and I'd like to make some last-minute changes to the renovation. Would it be possible for you to come on Sunday morning instead of Friday? We want it to be a perfect surprise for when we get back from our trip." The second call was to a painter recommended by the decorator herself. "Good morning. I need an urgent job for this weekend. It's in London, in Chelsea. A special job. Very specific. I'll pay triple the normal rate if you can maintain absolute discretion." The third call was the most difficult. "Olivia? It's Eleanor. I need to ask you a very big favor." "Yes, it has to do with the photos you took of me. Could you print a particular one? The profile one where I'm with Leo by the window. I need it to be large. Very large." On Friday morning, while Victoria posted photos from the airport with hearts and airplane emojis, Eleanor packed the most important suitcase of her life. "Are you sure about this?" Sophie asked her, having agreed to stay with Leo for the weekend. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life. What if you get caught? They won't catch me. I know that house better than they do. I know where the spare keys are. I know which neighbors are away. I know exactly when no one's on the street." Sophie hugged her sister. "Just be careful. And remember, Leo needs you. It's precisely because of Leo that I have to do this. So that when he grows up, he knows his mother never let herself be humiliated without fighting back." Eleanor kissed her son's forehead, who slept peacefully in Sophie's arms, oblivious that his mother was about to fight the most important battle of her life. "I'll be back Sunday night, and when I come back, everything will have changed." The train to London left in an hour. Revenge, after decades of waiting, was about to begin. What do you predict will happen when William and Victoria return home? Share your wildest guesses in the comments below. The unveiling of truth. Saturday morning, London awoke gray and damp, as if the city itself sensed what was about to happen. Eleanor had spent the night in a small guest house near the train station, sleeping barely 2 hours, while mentally reviewing every detail of her plan. At 9 in the morning, she took the underground towards Chelsea with a small suitcase, and her heart pounding so hard she feared other passengers could hear it. In her bag, she carried the spare keys to the house, the ones William had never bothered to ask for back, and a poster-sized photograph that Olivia had discreetly prepared. Albert Bridge Road looked exactly the same as always. Silent, elegant, with its perfectly manicured trees and 3-story townhouses that screamed bourgeois prosperity. Eleanor had walked that sidewalk hundreds of times, carrying shopping bags, returning from work, dreaming of the day she would push a baby stroller along those same stones. Her old house was at the end of the street, with its light stone facade and green shutters she herself had chosen when they moved in. The front garden looked neglected, with the plants she had cared for years now withered from lack of attention. Eleanor stood in front of the door for several minutes, feeling the weight of all the memories she had built within those walls. The first time William had given her the keys as an engagement surprise. The nights she had spent painting rooms, imagining what her married life would be like. The morning she had taken the pregnancy test in the upstairs bathroom and had run downstairs to tell William. All of that had happened in this house, and all of it had been erased as if it had never existed. She took a deep breath and inserted the key into the lock. The door opened with the same soft creak as always, but the smell was different. It no longer smelled of her perfume, of the vanilla candles she lit at night, of the moisturizer she put on after showering. Now it smelled of fresh paint, expensive floral perfume, of a life that wasn't hers. The entryway had been completely transformed. The walls, which had once been painted a soft yellow that reminded her of the Liverpool sun, were now an immaculate cold white. Her paintings had disappeared, replaced by black and white photographs of landscapes she didn't recognize. Eleanor walked up the stairs slowly, touching the wooden banister she had polished so many times. On the first floor was what had once been her study, where she wrote freelance articles and kept all her books. Now it was a private gym, with gleaming machines and mirrors covering the walls. But it was when she reached the second floor that she felt her soul break. The door to what was meant to be Leo's room was open. Eleanor peeked in and put a hand to her mouth to stifle a cry. The room had been converted into a gigantic walk-in closet. The walls, which she had painted a soft yellow, thinking of her son's first years, were now a pale pink. Where the crib they had bought together should have been, there were now shelves full of high heels. Where she had imagined the changing table, dozens of dresses hung, organized by color. On the wall where she had planned to put Leo's first photos, there was a full-length mirror surrounded by lights, like in an actress's dressing room. Eleanor sat on the floor of what should have been her son's room and cried silently for 10 minutes. She cried for the broken dreams, for the sleepless nights imagining how she would decorate that space, for all the times she had caressed her pregnant belly while planning the future in that room. But after those 10 minutes, she wiped away her tears, stood up from the floor, and took out her mobile phone. "Robert, this is the lady who called you on Friday." Yes, I'm here now. Can you come now?" Robert arrived half an hour later. He was a man in his 50s, with paint-stained hands and an expression that suggested he had seen it all in his years of work. Eleanor had explained on the phone that she wanted to create a surprise mural for when her husband returned from his trip, and he had accepted the job without asking too many questions. "All right, madam. Show me what you want me to paint." Eleanor handed him several papers with handwritten texts. "I want you to write these sentences exactly as they are here, in the font size I indicate, on the walls I'm going to point out." Robert read the papers and frowned. "Are you sure about this, madam? Some of these phrases are quite harsh." "Completely sure. And I'll pay you triple if you can finish today before 6. For the next 6 hours, Eleanor directed the most important transformation of her life. On the master bedroom wall, just above the bed where William and Victoria now slept, Robert wrote in elegant black letters, "I've fallen in love with another person." On the hallway wall, opposite the bathroom, "I don't want to lie to you, or to our son." In the living room, above the new sofa she didn't recognize, "She's moving into our house next week." In the kitchen, where she had so often prepared romantic dinners for William, "I don't want to hurt you, I'm just being honest." And finally, in Leo's old room, now transformed into Victoria's dressing room, she hung the photograph Olivia had printed, herself in profile, holding newborn Leo, with the golden light filtering through the window and an expression of maternal love so pure that it was impossible to look at it without being moved. Below the photograph, Robert wrote the most devastating phrase of all, "This is where our son should have grown up." When they finished, Eleanor walked through the house one last time, photographing every wall, every phrase, every corner of her silent revenge. "Are you happy with the result?" Robert asked, as he packed his brushes. Eleanor smiled with a serenity she hadn't felt in months. "Perfect, exactly as I had imagined." Before leaving, she left an envelope on the dining room table. Inside were copies of all of Leo's birth photos, the ultrasound William never wanted to frame, and the birth certificate where he was listed as the father. On the last page, she had written by hand, "So you don't forget who you really are." At 7 in the evening, Eleanor closed the door of her old house for the last time. William and Victoria would return from the Lake District the next day, expecting to find their renovated love sanctuary. Instead, they would find a museum of guilt that would haunt them forever. What are your thoughts on Eleanor's final act of defiance? Do you think William and Victoria deserve this? Share your opinions in the comments. Your feedback means the world to us. If you're enjoying this story, please give it a like, share it, and subscribe to our channel for more captivating narratives. The Reckonings on Sunday night. William and Victoria returned from the Lake District, their cheeks tanned and an artificial euphoria clinging to them. the kind only a honeymoon paid for, with money tainted by betrayal, could provide. Victoria had flooded her social media with photos of sunset cocktails, passionate beach kisses, and captions like, "When you find your soulmate, everything just clicks perfectly." William drove his luxury car through the Chelsea streets, feeling like the conqueror who had gotten everything he wanted: a young, beautiful woman, a house renovated to his new tastes, and the freedom of having eliminated the complications of his previous life. "I can't wait to see the house," Victoria said, checking her makeup in the car mirror. "Charlotte assured me it would be an incredible surprise. You'll love it. It's exactly what we needed to start our new life together." Victoria snuggled against his arm like a contented cat. "You know what I like most about you, William? You're not afraid to make tough decisions. Other men would have stayed trapped in situations that no longer made them happy." William smiled with the self-satisfied grin he'd perfected over years of closing real estate deals. Life's too short to live out of obligation instead of passion. They parked in front of the house at 10:30 that night. The street was silent, as always, with neighbors' windows illuminated by the blue glow of televisions and the aroma of Sunday dinners drifting on the air. "Finally home," Victoria exclaimed, dragging her pink suitcase towards the front door. William unlocked the door and switched on the hall lights. Everything seemed normal. The immaculate white walls, the new furniture they had chosen together, the smell of fresh paint mixed with the air freshener Victoria had placed throughout the house. "I'm going upstairs to take a shower," Victoria said, giving him a quick kiss. "This trip has left me exhausted, but in the best possible way." William watched her ascend the stairs with the feline grace that had captivated him from day one, then headed to the kitchen to pour himself a glass of wine. It had been a perfect weekend, 3 days without thinking about Eleanor, without feeling the weight of guilt, without remembering the look of pain in her eyes when he'd handed her the divorce papers. But when he switched on the kitchen light, the glass slipped from his hands and shattered on the floor. On the wall, written in elegant, perfect black letters, was the phrase, "I don't want to hurt you. I'm just being honest." His own words, the very ones he had told Eleanor in the hospital. "William?" Victoria shouted from upstairs. "What was that noise?" He couldn't respond. He stood paralyzed, staring at those words that seemed to mock him from his own kitchen wall. With trembling hands, he ran to the living room. There, above the new sofa where he had planned to spend romantic evenings with Victoria, another phrase awaited him. "She's moving into our house next week." No, he murmured, his breathing quickening. He rushed towards the stairs, but stopped dead upon seeing the hallway wall. "I don't want to lie to you, or to our son." "William!" Victoria's scream from the master bedroom sounded as if she'd seen a ghost. He took the stairs 2 at a time, and found Victoria standing in the bedroom doorway, her face as pale as wax, one hand covering her mouth. Above the bed where they had slept together for the past few weeks, written in letters that seemed to bleed across the white wall, was the most devastating phrase of all. "I've fallen in love with another person." "What the hell is this, William?" Victoria whispered, her voice no longer sounding confident or triumphant. I don't know. This wasn't here when we left. Who broke into our house? Who wrote this?" But William knew exactly who it was. He knew with the same certainty that his perfect life had just turned into a nightmare. "Eleanor," he murmured. "Your ex-wife. That lunatic came in here?" Victoria ran to the old study, now a gym, hoping to find a space free of this madness. But the walls were clean. She rushed downstairs to the dressing room that had once been the baby's room, her personal sanctuary filled with clothes and shoes, and it was there that she collapsed. On the main wall of the dressing room, framed as if it were a work of art, hung a photograph of Eleanor holding a newborn baby. The image was devastatingly beautiful, the mother in profile, with the golden light illuminating her face as she looked at her son, with a love so pure that it was painful to behold. Beneath the photograph, the final phrase, "This is where our son should have grown up." Victoria sank to the dressing room floor, surrounded by all the expensive dresses and designer shoes that suddenly seemed as insignificant as fallen leaves. "That room was for a baby?" she asked, her voice broken. William appeared in the doorway, his face distraught, his hands trembling. "Victoria, I can explain." "Explain what?" she screamed, getting up from the floor in a fury. "That you turned your son's room into my dressing room. That you made me complicit in erasing a baby from this house. I didn't know she was going to. It's not about what she was going to do. It's about what you already did." Victoria began to tear clothes from the hangers, throwing them onto the floor in a fit of hysterics. "I'm living in another family's house. I'm sleeping in another woman's bed. I'm trampling on the dreams of a baby I didn't even know existed. William, calm down. Calm down. Look around you, William. Look what you've done. Look what you've made me do." The photograph of Eleanor with Leo watched them from the wall, serene and accusatory, like a silent judge who had delivered its verdict. On the dining room table, the envelope Eleanor had left still waited. But neither of them would have the courage to open it that night. The house that was supposed to be their paradise had become the most elegant hell they had ever imagined. The true victory. On Monday morning, Victoria Thorne didn't wake up in the bed she had shared with William. She woke up on the living room sofa, still dressed in the previous day's clothes, surrounded by used tissues, her eyes swollen from crying all night. William had tried to sleep in the master bedroom, but every time he closed his eyes, he saw the black letters mocking him from the wall. "I've fallen in love with another person," his own words turned into an eternal condemnation. At 7 in the morning, Victoria made a decision. "I'm leaving," she announced, appearing in the kitchen where William was attempting to brew coffee with trembling hands. "Victoria, wait. We can fix this. We can paint the walls. Change." "Change what, William?" she interrupted, her voice devoid of the flirtatious sweetness he had known. "Are you going to change the fact that you abandoned your newborn son? Are you going to change that you made me an unwitting accomplice to something horrible?" William approached her, arms outstretched, but Victoria recoiled as if he were toxic. "Didn't you know? Or did you choose not to know? You told me you were getting a divorce, but I never asked why. You told me you had an ex-wife, but never wanted to know the details. Ignorance suited you, because it allowed you to feel good about what we were doing. That's not fair. You know what's not fair?" Victoria's voice cracked. "That woman had to come into her own house to remind us who we really are. That she had to put her baby's photo in my dressing room so I would realize I'm living on the ashes of a family." Victoria went upstairs, and William followed, desperate. "Victoria, please, all that's in the past. What we have is real." She stopped in front of the dressing room, looking at the photograph of Eleanor with Leo, which remained hanging on the wall like a silent reproach. "You know what's the most terrible thing of all, William? She's beautiful. Genuinely beautiful. Not like me, who needs 2 hours of makeup and aesthetic treatments to feel presentable. She's there, just given birth, vulnerable, broken, and she's still more beautiful than I am on my best day." Don't say that. And you know why she's beautiful? Because she's real. Because she loves that child with all she has. Because even though you betrayed her at the most sacred moment of her life, she is still a mother. While what am I? A 35-year-old woman who settled for someone else's leftovers. Victoria began to pull clothes from the wardrobes and stuff them into suitcases with frantic movements. "Stop. Please, stop," William pleaded. "We can get through this. We can move somewhere else, start fresh. And then what? Wait for you to get bored of me in a few years too? Wait for another younger woman to appear and decide you no longer love me? William remained silent because he had no answer. Exactly, Victoria continued. Because men like you don't change. They inflict pain and move on. And women like me, we become complicit until someone holds a mirror up to us. She finished packing and headed for the door, but stopped when she saw the still sealed envelope on the dining room table. What's that? I don't know. Eleanor left it there. Victoria opened it before William could stop her. The birth photographs spilled onto the table. Eleanor holding Leo for the first time, the baby in the incubator, the first moments of a child who had come into the world, only to find his father had abandoned him before even meeting him. On the last page, Eleanor's careful handwriting read, "So you don't forget who you really are." Victoria looked at the photos for long minutes, feeling everything she had believed about herself and the relationship she had built with William collapse from within. "She's right," she finally murmured. "This is who you really are. A man who abandons his newborn son to go on honeymoon with his mistress. And this is who I really am. A woman who fell in love with a married man and convinced herself she was the victim of an unhappy marriage instead of the destroyer of a family." Victoria picked up one of the birth photographs, the one of Eleanor looking at Leo with that fierce, protective love. "Do you know, when was the last time someone looked at me like that? With true love, not with desire, not with convenience, but with pure love." William didn't answer. "Never, William. Never in my life. Because I've spent 35 years being beautiful on the outside and empty on the inside. And you had all this, and you threw it away." Victoria headed for the door with her suitcases, but before leaving, she turned one last time. "I hope that when that child grows up and asks you why you weren't there when he was born, you have a better answer than, 'I fell in love with someone else.'" The door closed with a dry thud, and William was left alone in the house that had been his paradise and had become his final judgment. In the silence that followed, only the ticking of the living room clock could be heard, and the echo of his own words bouncing from every painted wall. For the first time since he had met Victoria, William sat on the floor of what should have been Leo's room and cried. Not for Victoria, who was gone. Not for Eleanor, whom he had lost forever. He cried for the man he had once been, before becoming someone capable of abandoning his own child. But it was too late for regret. Some decisions have no turning back. The true victory, 3 months after the silent revenge that had shaken the walls of the Chelsea house, Eleanor Hayes woke up in her small Liverpool room with Leo in her arms and a smile she hadn't felt in years. The baby had grown visibly. His eyes now followed objects with curiosity. His tiny hands clutched everything they found. And when Eleanor spoke to him, he responded with those adorable coos that melted any heart. Most importantly, Leo seemed calm, as if he had inherited his mother's new serenity. Sophie entered the room with a steaming cup of coffee and that knowing smile they had shared since they were girls. "Good morning, silent avenger. How did you sleep?" "Better than ever," Eleanor replied, sitting up in bed as Leo snuggled against her chest. "No nightmares, no waking up thinking about William. For the first time in months, I've slept in peace. I'm glad. You have a visitor." Eleanor frowned. "Who?" "Olivia. She says she has important news." Olivia Brown appeared at the door with an expression mixing excitement and nervousness. She carried a folder under her arm, and that contained energy she always had when she was about to change someone's life. "Eleanor, you have to see this," she said, sitting on the bed and opening the folder. Inside were newspaper clippings, social media screenshots, and an official letterhead from a London publishing house. "Remember the photographs I took of you? The maternal essay?" "Of course. Well, it turns out one of my contacts at a women's magazine saw them and completely fell in love with the series. Not just the photos, but the story behind them. A mother who finds her strength after being abandoned during childbirth. Eleanor felt her heart race. What do you mean? They want to publish a full feature, your story told by you, with the photographs as illustrations. But there's more. Olivia showed her the official letter. The Phoenix Books publishing house is interested. They want you to write a book, a memoir about motherhood, betrayal, and overcoming adversity. They even have a title, When Love Isn't Enough, A Mother's Rebirth. Eleanor was speechless, staring at the documents as if they were a dream she might wake from at any moment. I don't know if I can. It's only been 3 months. I'm still processing everything that happened. Eleanor, Sophie interjected, sitting on the other side of the bed. You've been saying for years you wanted to write again, that William convinced you that you had no glint, that it was better for you to just be a housewife. This is your chance to prove him wrong. Leo will be with you on every page you write. This is your story, but it's also his. Someday, when he's older, he can read how his mother fought for him from day one. Olivia showed her more papers. There's something else. Several mothers have seen the photos I published in my online portfolio. Mothers who have been through similar situations. They want to meet you, Eleanor. They want to hear your story because it gives them hope. Hope? Yes, because you showed that you can be abandoned at the most vulnerable moment of your life and still find a way to move forward with dignity, without violence, without shouting, just with the truth. Eleanor caressed Leo's cheek, who looked at her with those serious eyes that seemed to understand more than he should at his age. You know what's the strangest thing of all? She murmured. I no longer feel anger towards William. I don't hate him anymore. Really? Really? Because I realized that revenge wasn't about hurting him. It was about reclaiming myself. To show that I wasn't the weak, dependent woman he believed I was. Sophie smiled. And Victoria? Victoria made a brave decision by leaving. She acknowledged her mistake and left with dignity. That makes her a better person than William, who still hasn't faced the consequences of his actions. Eleanor looked out the window at the small garden where her mother was watering the usual plants, whispering words of encouragement as she had all her life. I accept, she finally said. The feature? The book? The talks with other mothers? All of it? Sophie asked, excited. All of it. I want to tell my story, not to seek pity, but to remind other women that the end of a marriage is not the end of their lives. Olivia and Sophie embraced, emotional. There's one condition, Eleanor added. A portion of the book's profits will go to a fund for single mothers to help them get by when they find themselves in situations like mine. Of course. And you know what the fund will be called? What? Eleanor smiled, looking at Leo, who had started to fall asleep in her arms. The Leo Fund, because he taught me that sometimes the best things in life arrive in the darkest moments. 6 months later, Eleanor Hayes was signing copies of her book at a London bookstore, surrounded by women who had found the strength to rebuild their own lives in her story. Leo, now a smiling baby of almost a year, accompanied her in his stroller, the center of attention for all his mother's admirers. In London, William Hayes still lived alone in a house whose walls he had had painted 5 times in 6 months, but where the words of his betrayal seemed to remain visible to him, like ghosts that haunted him day and night. Victoria Thorne had returned to her hometown in the Scottish Highlands, where she worked at a shelter for abused women, and had begun therapy to heal the wounds of a life built on superficiality. But Eleanor no longer thought about either of them. She had found something much more valuable than revenge. She had found herself, and that, in the end, had turned out to be the most complete victory of all. 2 years after that night in the hospital when her world collapsed, Eleanor Hayes was in the garden of her family home in Liverpool, watching Leo take his first wobbly steps among the geraniums that his grandmother Brenda cared for so meticulously. The boy, now with curly golden hair and a smile that lit up any room, walked towards his mother with outstretched arms and that fierce determination he seemed to have inherited from her. "Mama! Mama!" he shouted in his clear little voice, falling to his knees a few inches from her arms, before getting up again with an infectious laugh. Eleanor lifted him into the air, feeling the perfect weight of her son against her chest, and for a moment allowed herself to remember the broken woman she had been 2 years ago. That woman no longer existed. In her place, someone completely new had been born. A mother, a writer, an inspiration to thousands of women who had found hope in her story. Her second book, Letters to My Son on Courage, had just hit the bestseller list, and the Leo Fund had already helped more than 200 single mothers find work, housing, and emotional support. "How's my favorite grandson?" Sophie asked, coming into the garden with a tray of homemade lemonade. "Trying to conquer the world, as always," Eleanor replied, sitting Leo on her lap. "Just like his mum." Brenda approached from her potted plants, her hands full of earth, and that wise smile she had inherited from generations of Liverpool women who knew how to survive any storm. "You know what Mrs. Green from next door told me today?" she commented, taking off her gardening gloves. "That her granddaughter in Birmingham bought your book after her husband left her while she was pregnant. She says she's now studying to be a nurse, and your story gave her the courage she needed." Eleanor felt that familiar warmth in her chest that she always experienced when she heard testimonials like that. "It's strange," she murmured, caressing Leo's hair. "Sometimes I think the worst thing that happened to me became the best thing that could happen to many other women." "It's not strange, my dear," Brenda said, sitting next to them. "It's justice. Real justice doesn't always come in the form of punishment for those who hurt us. Sometimes it comes in the form of us becoming something better than we ever were." Eleanor's phone vibrated with a message. It was from Olivia, who was now her official photo editor. "Have you seen the news? William sold the Chelsea house. He's moving into an apartment. It seems he never managed to erase the ghosts." Eleanor read the message and then deleted the conversation without responding. She no longer needed to know what was happening with William. He was no longer part of her story. Leo began to babble something unintelligible as he played with his mother's fingers, and she leaned down to kiss his forehead. "You know what, little one?" she whispered. "Your dad missed the chance to know the most wonderful boy in the world, but his loss is my gain, because you taught me that true love isn't what's promised at weddings. It's what's born when someone depends completely on you, and you give everything you have without expecting anything in return." Sophie discreetly wiped away a tear. "Eleanor, there's something I've wanted to tell you for a long time." "What?" "I'm proud of you. Not for the success of the books or the foundation. I'm proud of the woman you've become. That night you called me from the hospital. I thought you wouldn't be able to get through it. But look where you are now." Eleanor looked around. The fragrant garden of her childhood, her healthy and happy son in her arms, her mother and sister by her side. The future full of infinite possibilities she had built with her own hands. "You know what the biggest irony of all is?" she finally said. "William thought he was giving me the worst news of my life that night in the hospital, but he was actually freeing me to become the person I was meant to be." Leo fell asleep in her arms as the Liverpool sun began to set, painting the sky with oranges and pinks that rivaled Brenda's geraniums. And in that perfect moment, surrounded by the unconditional love of her family, and with the future shining before her like a promise fulfilled, Eleanor Hayes knew with absolute certainty that she had gained much more than she had ever lost. True love, after all, wasn't what she had lost. It was what she had found in herself. Would you have the courage to fight for your dignity like Eleanor did, or would you have settled for being a victim forever? Your participation in this channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you so much for following to the end. If you liked this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your opinion. Your participation is very important to us. Until next time.